Welcome back to the Bombshell Business Podcast. I am your host, Amber Hurdle, and I am still recovering from the conference that I spoke at last week. And it really inspired me to talk about why women's conferences are essential. So, we're going to cover my top three reasons and just really break down what exactly happened last week in New Orleans. So, last week, I was insanely lucky to be the human who got to have the opening keynote for the Vacation Rental Women's Summit that was at the Ritz-Carlton, in New Orleans, one of my favorite cities. And it was produced by VRM Intel and it was presented by Rented. VRM Intel founder Amy Highnote and her right hand, Rebecca Chapman, and the entire event team produced an event that is unlike anything I've ever personally experienced before. And just for the record, I have personally planned hundreds and hundreds of events, like large events, and I've spoken at hundreds of events. So like, this is not my first rodeo. And when I'm saying like, this was really special, I mean it. So things kicked off with my Velvet Machete leadership keynote, how to be confident and compassionate and what that means, especially as a woman. It's really a lot about personal branding. So that's what we started with. And then that segued into a gospel choir coming in from the back of the ballroom and walking through everybody singing This Little Light of Mine until they joined me on stage. And I handed the stage over to the magnificent MC, total funny woman, super fun girl, April Burns. So I'm saying these names because if you're in the industry, we want to definitely recognize the people, but just know this woman is just fun and sincere and wonderful. And I was so happy to get to know her on this trip. So now, all of that was just the first hour. Okay. And then it was followed by a gospel brunch. And then there was just more value, more fun, more surprises than anyone could have anticipated. And it was really curated for the female experience, down to like hand massages being given in between sessions. And then like the swag bags. Oh my gosh, the swag bags. First of all, only the Grammy swag bags could have competed with this. And I'm just lucky, seriously, legit. I'm lucky that the airport person who checked in my baggage did not charge me because, I'm the queen of the like 49-pound luggage, like Southwest 49 pounds, it could only be 50. So I was probably like right about, 48 or something. It was so over. And she just looked the other way. And that was the swag bag contents that sent me over the edge so significantly. So the women's conference gods were smiling upon me on my way back to Nashville. So now that you have a vision of this opulent environment, let's like really dig into the more practical reasons why such a women's conference is essential. Okay. So number one, networking is simply safer, both emotionally and physically. Okay. At a women's conference, everyone is encouraged to include everyone. And, you invite everyone to dinner or wherever you're going. And you don't really have to worry about if you're sending the wrong message to the opposite sex. You don't have to worry about sexual harassment. Raise your hand if you've ever been to a conference where men just come and think they can treat you however. And let me put a quick pause on this too, because for my bombshell boys, if you're listening to this podcast or if you're watching this on YouTube, I know you're an ally. Okay. And we know there are many, many, many men out there who are amazing. In fact, like literally, was it today or yesterday? It was yesterday. I signed up for a mastermind event. It's kind of like a mini conference, if you will, that I know is going to be primarily middle-aged white men. Okay. So like I'm paying money to go have this experience because they're amazing and they're wonderful. That is not a typical experience when a woman is acting when she's out in a professional world. So yes, there are a lot of great men, but even my closest male friends are stunned at the type of experiences that I have personally had. And like countless of my female friends can tell you like the creepy, creepy things that happen at conferences. Like I have gone back to my room where nobody knows what room number I'm in. and have had a phone call thinking, oh, it's the front desk, or what if something's wrong at home or whatever. I've picked it up and have been asked, like, what am I wearing? I'm not joking. You cannot make this kind of stuff up. And that's the mildest of it. Okay. So when I'm saying these kind of things, like, this is not a blanket statement against men. This is just what we honestly have to deal with when we go to co-ed conferences. Okay. So we don't have to, obviously, at a women's conference, it's less likely, not saying it doesn't happen, women on women, but less likely to have, to experience sexual harassment. And you don't have to worry about a dude getting like super sloppy drunk and then like making an awkward move. That's super awkward. Nobody wants that. And you don't have to play the mental games to measure every word, every action, and every decision that you make. Like, you just don't have to do the mental gymnastics. You can simply just be. And when you can simply be, then your heart and your mind and your soul can open up to really receive what is meant for you to experience at the conference. So it just takes the edge off, and it just helps you relax. Okay. When it's primarily women, or if it's made for women by women, because these things are all taken into consideration, and it eliminates the type of man. And I'll get into this later, the guys that came, because freaking rock stars. Okay. But if it's an all women's conference, it eliminates the type of man who would be more of a predator type. Okay. So again, not knocking men. Again, I say this all the time. I have an amazing dad. I'm a daddy's girl. I have a 19-year-old son. I want the world for him. I don't want anybody to believe things about him that are not true. I have 3 amazing brothers who are all feminists, by the way. And I have amazing male friends. So this is no knock against men. This is just me as a female talking about the typical female experience. Okay. So now that we have that baseline covered, let's keep going. Number 2, when you go to a women's conference, you're learning best practices by women for women. So as an example, in my keynote, we talked about personal branding, of course, and how to be confident and compassionate as a woman in business specifically. I use different terminology and different examples than I would have if men were in the room. So we talked about our inner voice, our inner critic. I call mine Gertrude. Everybody named theirs. How being different is better than being like the pretty one or the smart one, and how to really own that uniqueness you bring to the table, which is totally applicable as a man. I get it. I talk to men about these very same things, but I doubt that room would have oscillated between like laughing and crying and back again if I didn't use specific examples of what this looks like and feels like emotionally as a woman. It just is a different experience. But I will say, actually, some of the men even said that they cried through this too and laughed and did all those things. So, maybe it's the energy of the women. And they said this too. In fact, Steve Trover said that he, for the first time, really felt the emotional energy and the shifts in the room of women. And that's pretty compelling. Okay. So when that kind of thing happens and a man can feel the emotional response of the women around them, that is the power of putting that many women in a ballroom together. So the impact that my words had will penetrate deeper and longer because I spoke in a female's language. And that's also why I choose to talk about confidence specifically in my book, The Bombshell Businesswoman: How to Become a Bold, Brave, Female Entrepreneur. And I used that specifically for women. And it wasn't a book for all entrepreneurs or all people in business, because I wanted to be able to use the language, and I wanted to be able to use examples and very specific things that women contend with, because I know if I could get into your heart, then you're going to receive the content at a deeper way. So I did that in my book. I did that in the keynote. Now, in Doctors Emily and Amelia Nagoski's keynote speech about burnout, first of all, they're hysterical. This included dealing with the stress cycle, sexual health, and common traps that women specifically fall in to stop being so stressed. Like, we try all these different things, but hint, you will not recover from burnout with green smoothies and bubble baths. Like, that's not going to work. Okay. So if you said that to a man, probably wouldn't have the same like landing. If you want to learn more about what you can do, please buy their book. It's called Burnout: The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle. And you could get that on Amazon. We will link to it in the show notes, and we'll link to the conference and everything in the show notes as well. Now, that was the second day keynote. Now, the closing keynote, y'all, oh my gosh, the COO of the title sponsor, Rented, instead of doing like some schmarmy commercial, like, we're Rented and here's what we do and here's why you should buy from us, they didn't use their time that way. They actually put their COO, Karen Fleck, on the stage, and she told her story of being not only a woman in business, but a woman in business who grew up with a stutter. So on top of all of the common like female realities that she referenced, like sharing an idea that was completely dismissed only to have a man say it 20 minutes later, and he gets all kinds of accolades. She explained these stories. She told these stories. She made us laugh literally while stuttering. I just did it myself. It was amazing. She told the story of all this and how she showed herself grace as she practiced not stuttering, but still contending with the stutter and this disability. So it was just, we were all in stitches, first of all. And she was stuttering with no apologies. And we were all just in complete awe of her. And really just thinking about, one of the things that I told her was, she has a stutter. It's audible. You can see, you can hear, you can experience her disability. But I tell you all the time on this show, for the same reason that she talked about her stutter, I have clinical anxiety, I have ADD, I have mild OCD. Those are invisible disabilities. Those are invisible things that I contend with. So when she's on that flipping stage talking about the female experience and what it's like to be a woman in business, and a woman in business who grew up with a stutter and being picked on and teased, and that's and also having that experience of being picked on and teased, or made to maybe looked at like she was stupid or something in the professional setting, that opened up every single woman at this conference to say, like, if she can stand up there with that and stutter on the stage while we're all out here in stitches laughing. And also, I'm sure there were some tears during Karen's keynote as well. It just gave us all permission to own whatever it is that's holding us back and move forward. And y'all, it's one of the best keynote speeches I've ever heard. And it was because she was so freaking relatable. Again, content for women, curated by women. And then there were all the breakouts. I mean, all the breakouts. So it was just, everything was amazingly on target for this audience. It wasn't just about the industry. It wasn't just about women. It was a combination of all of it. And it was truly remarkable. So that's number one and number two. Number three, women, we naturally curate and nurture community. So leading up to the conference, women got to know each other online. There's a Facebook group, and we did some webinars. And Amy Highnote, the founder of VRM Intel, and I worked together last year to do some kind of like preliminary webinars to get these women connected and really thinking about their thought leadership and their position in the industry. And leaving the conference, I saw photos of women who did not know each other before and who left looking like they'd be the best of friends for life. And, you know, masterminds were created, and friendships were created, and future trips were created, and plans for the next women's conference and how they're all going to go together. So I'm not saying that men don't experience this too, because I mean, I go to like pretty male dominated conferences like podcasting and tech conferences and things like that. And men, man, they get their bromances on too. So I'm not saying this is very specific, like that only women can do this. I'm just saying that when women are at a conference and then they get ready in each other's hotel rooms for the 80s party that night, and there's like Aquanet filling the air and scrunchies are getting tightened, it's just a different kind of bonding, especially when you have a glass of champagne in your hand. It's just a different level. So the bros, they do it their way, we do it our way. And one of the best parts of this entire conference is that this community of women in vacation rentals came together to recognize the woman who created the reality for them. So while Amy Highnote, again, the founder of VRM Intel, this industry magazine, she highlights all the good, the bad, and the ugly of the vacation rental and the short-term rental industry. And that's her job day in and day out. But, whoever recognizes her for all of that effort, well, the industry did. Okay. They created a new award, the Crusader Award, for all she has done for the industry. And I'll link to that video if you're interested in watching it. It would take an entire podcast episode to talk about all the different accolades, but it was full of industry rock stars. Like, everybody knew the people in there, and they were all singing her praises. So again, I'll link to that in the show notes. Maybe you get an idea of to do it for somebody in your industry. But why did that happen? Women in particular, and Rebecca, her team member, spearheaded this, but the women took it so seriously and just went over the top with it, because a woman inherently knows what it's like to do a ton of the heavy lifting without getting a lot of thanks. So I'm not saying that dads or husbands or men in general don't have this experience, but women tend to be recognized less. And I should probably have found a statistic on that. I know I have one somewhere, but we don't ask for a lot of recognition, and we kind of quietly do things behind the scenes as a rule, not all the time, unless you're like me, because I'm going to be in your face about everything. So we're not all wired that way, but by and large, that is the typical female experience. And so, because we are not the best at tooting our own horns, it sometimes takes a woman recognizing another woman to get to experience that level of recognition. And that happened in the most beautiful way. And that's how this conference ended. Now, all of that said, I do have to give a shout out to the men who were in attendance. And you can certainly call these men allies. Yet even they said it was one of the best conferences that they have ever attended or experienced. And they spoke of how welcoming all of the women were and how inclusive they were. It wasn't like, "Ooh, you're a man, what are you doing here?" They're just absolutely like thrilled that they were there, brought them into the fold, which is not the norm for their average conference. And they spoke to the lack of like the one-up mentality that typical male conferences experience, or like co-ed experiences. When men get together, it's like, I'm better, whatever, I did this, well, I did this, that just whole one-up thing, that didn't exist. And one of them said that they didn't feel like they had to constantly walk into the room feeling like I have to be the tallest in the room. So they didn't have that syndrome going on. In fact, I will even link to a LinkedIn article that Andrew McConnell, who is the CEO of Rented, who was the title sponsor, wrote about his experience and address the typical male question, which is fair to ask. I'm just saying, what would women do if we had an all male conference? And his response, and I'm going to quote him. So if you're watching on YouTube, I'm going to need to read this real quick. Okay. So I'm not going to look at you. "It's not that other conferences don't invite or allow women to come, no more than the Women's Summit failed to invite and welcome men. Quite the opposite." And they did. They totally encouraged men to come. "Rather, it's that a man's perspective, and almost inevitably a white man's perspective, is the default perspective in planning, coordinating, and running our industry's events, and most industries for that matter." That's what a man said about this conference. So yeah, a women's conference by women, for women, it just simply has a different flavor. Okay. We can be inclusive of men while also being able to relax and allow and be served content in a way that can help us change not only our careers, but our lives. And we can still love and appreciate our male counterparts. And, even the ones who don't quite get it, we can still love them. But it gives us the space to simply be and to experience it as a woman. So my takeaway, I personally think I was made to speak at women's conferences, and I have over and over again. I mean, so vacation rental, insurance, finance, construction, you name it. But this one showed me just how important it is to kick off the energy of a women's conference, to help set the tone for the rest of the magic to happen. And it just gave me so much life. Like, I want to do that. I want to do it. And I want to do it again and again and again. So my question for you, I always like to ask you to email me, because I love hearing from you, and anyone who's emailed can attest that man, if I've missed you, it's because you slid through during a difficult time. But I answer everybody. So my question for you is, do you regularly attend a women's conference each year? Email me which one it is, because maybe we can compile a list of like the must attend events for women. That would be a pretty cool list to put together. I know we can Google, but I want to know what your favorites are. Okay. So I can Google somebody else's favorites, but I want to know about my audience, my people, my bombshells. I want to know where you like to go to get fed in that way. So that should do it for this episode. Be sure that you leave a rating and review on your favorite podcasting app, or if you're on YouTube, give it a like, maybe pop a comment in there if you prefer to watch it on YouTube. Share this with your girlfriends and your managers, or anyone that you need to talk to or lobby for your own professional development dollars. And, stand up for you, stand up for what you need in your life specifically to become a better professional and a better woman, or a better man. If you're one of our bombshell boys, make sure that you ask, because no's are free. Ask for that professional development. And I will see you on the next episode. Thanks for listening to the Bombshell Business Podcast. Visit amberhurdle.com for more resources like show notes, and check out thebombshellbusinesswoman.com to grab my book and download the free bonuses.